So virtualization on ARM has kind of been our golden unicorn. You know, it would be nice if it existed, but so far both the architecture and community support have not been there. This has been due to the start of ARM servers actually coming into existence. There has been some change. Currently in Ubuntu, our virtualization solution is LXC, and LXC is known to work fairly well on ARM, although there are some limitations not specific to ARM that make it a viable solution for some. Specifically, it is possible to break out of an LXC container, thank you, and break into the lower system. So it's only usable in systems which are where the container itself would be trusted. So there have been some kernel work to fix that, but kernel patches, I believe, have stalled upstream. So
it's going to happen, just not in time for the LTS.
Right.
Cross-hutch virtualization. GNU doesn't run on ARM.
Right, but there are other virtualization solutions for ARM. So just so a little bit of historic one, there is a port of Zen to ARM that is more or less dead and only supported in very small port platforms.
Actually, they're revising it.
I hear it's been revived.
Yep.
Yay! But so scratch that. Zen on ARM is coming back, but as I'm guessing it's not at a point where
I
it's
don't have a time frame, but I've talked to a lot of people about it, and it's being worked on
okay.
actively.
It's targeted at A15, so
Okay, yeah. So
I imagine that they're aiming to have it working by the time something is
right. So I think an important thing to bring up is the Cortex A15. This is the next generation chip that's coming from ARM sometime. I don't particularly remember the time frame. It'll be the first chip that supports actual virtualization similar to the VTX extensions on Intel and other architectures. So when that happens, KVM and other full virtualization solutions become viable. Until then, we are kind of stuck without hardware-assisted virtualization. As I mentioned before, LXC is currently what we are using, but we were pointed out to by a member of the community about the Code Zero embedded hypervisor, and I've actually taken a little time to look through it. It's essentially based around L4, and for those of you unfamiliar, L4 is a very lightweight microkernel that the door is a very lightweight microkernel that has mostly been used in embedded and custom solutions. And historically, there has also been a port to run Linux as an L4 service. This, though, has not been all that useful towards virtualization. Code Zero takes L4 and makes it so you can run multiple Linux instances under that single L4. It's kind of similar to Zen, except it's recycling existing code. There is a port for L4, although I was unable to get it running by the time I left for UDS, just due to all the insanity leading up to this week. So the question is, are we interested in looking, currently Code Zero supports OMAP 4, and I believe there's work in progress to enable it for the IMX53 Quick Start. Those are the only two platforms, though, I know that are on the roadmap.
So L4 is acting as the hypervisor?
Yes.
How does it do it without hardware support?
L4 has supported ARM for years.
No, I mean without virtualization support in the CPU.
It's the same way Zen has done it. All the kernel itself is modified to abstract away.
Okay. Cooperative
guests. PBOps.
Yes. So it's essentially Zen. I believe, from my brief understanding, like I said, I did not have a lot of time to dig into the code. It looks like they took the L4 and Linux code, ported it to ARM, and then added a whole lot of polish. L4 itself has very low overhead, and it's a lot closer to Zen if you're trying to think of existing virtualization solutions than KVM. And again, we're limited to OMAP 4 unless someone likes to support it to, say, Calzada. But it is a viable solution, and the question is, do we want to run with it, package it, or do we want to currently stay with our LXC solution?
What makes it viable? Just the fact that it's got upstream support?
It's got upstream support, it can run multiple kernel instances, and...
Hang on. I'm looking at the Git tree for Code Zero, and it says last changed 9 months ago.
Huh?
That's why I asked about viable.
Yeah. That looks a bit concerning to me.
I swear I looked at this the other day and it had been updated more recently than that.
I mean, I might be looking at wrong. This is the first time I've heard of this project, so
Well, there was a release of Code Zero
In
less than a
September.
month. Yeah, so I think that's probably an outdated release, or they're not using
Yeah.
like Git.
Point 5 was released in September, so that's
Yeah.
active enough.
Come on. Sorry, their Git thing is unbelievably slow.
Well, I mean,
I mean,
how
I think-
viable is it really?
I think this is
Consider-
just a question of Git web screwing with your head, because it's probably showing a branch that's not one you care about.
When you consider how much it's going to take to support versus, a real virtualization solution's coming.
That is a good point. I'm bringing it up to see viability. Generally speaking, I'm not sure I advise as much over LXC given the limited scope of hardware it runs on. And as we've said before, we're already using OMAP 4 for something it was never meant to, and that is as a server platform. So,
Seems like they both require semi-homogeneous guests.
huh,
I mean, in the fact that it has to be Linux.
yes, but
We're okay with that for now.
Now, on ARM, that's true. Never mind.
show me our operating system for Panda board, and
Right.
yeah, that's not what's best.
From my point of view, it's worth at least noting that it exists, probably documenting it on a wiki page, pointing to them. But in terms of virtualization, we're interested in it for servers. We're going to be our primary focus this cycle will be on real servers like Calzeta that's just announced. This doesn't port to it. We're certainly not going to port it. If they decide to port to Calzeta, it might become more interesting. But I think it is worth a documentation page on the Ubuntu wiki around ARM and virtualization, because it may be of value to the community. I think, given where we're at and that we're waiting for the A15 and we're focusing on existing servers, it's probably not that interesting, other than as a data point for the community. Is that?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, unless they plan to port it to a ton of useful platforms. It's
Well, given the fact it is based around L4, and L4 itself has historically been incredibly easy to port, I wouldn't be surprised if it's got a lower cost to bring up than, say, the Linux kernel. Like I said, I have not gone through the sources in depth. I don't quite know how easy it is to port, but it may be worth talking to upstream and seeing what other devices they have on their roadmap and realistically how difficult it is to support. If it's something that a team of engineers at Lunaro or one of the OEMs can knock out in a week,
So it's certainly not something I think would be supported for the whole LTS. So it's going to be a universe thing, which is going to be.
yes.
So this is a technology preview at
Two, I
best.
think our LXC solution is going to be a little better than you think. We're actually looking at root hardening it via a security solution instead of via container. So
Serge on our team does have a plan. It's just the time. Yeah, he's previously documented over the years how to harden it.
well, there's the upstream solution, and then there's what we're going to manage for LTS, right? They're two separate things.
Yeah. So on a slightly related note, is anyone actually following the KVM ARM port stuff?
I'm in contact with ARM. I haven't started looking at code. I know that they're doing work on their simulators and emulators, but beyond that, I don't know exactly where they're at.
So, I mean,
There's a Lunaro session on KVM on ARM on Friday where we're going to try and thrash out what the heck are we doing here, when are we trying to do it for, what's the work involved, that kind of thing.
it seemed that Columbia Uni did the
Yeah,
university.
so this is Christopher Duff from Columbia, who's done a bunch of patches for doing some initial support, and the general consensus seems to be those good patches, they're pretty clean, people have reviewed them and liked them. There's some missing features in there, and they need to be upstreamed via Abby-Booty's KVM trade and stuff. But it's a good start, and we're going to build on that, basically.
So you bring up the point of source, I think I just understood why. I had been looking at the Git tree and I hadn't noticed the date. When I pulled the tarball, what happened was the license changed from GPLv3 to proprietary. So that's what happened. So that suddenly just became a non-starter. And their website still says open
Yeah, I saw
GPL.
that.
So, well, I just shot myself in the foot. That while it might be interesting to still have some documentation on supporting Code Zero with a proprietary license at best, it could be dropped into multiverse and without in-depth.
To be honest, if it's already gone proprietary, there actually seems very little benefit in us undertaking
Yeah.
work to do it.
And
it seems we need to do more work on LXC enrichment and follow the KVM stuff and perhaps contribute to that.
I love that their website is so outdated on this. And
Also, you want to concentrate more on the tools that rather than hypervisor as well.
yes, so I think Code Zero has officially become a non-starter in that respect. It may be interesting from a community perspective, but from a district perspective, it's unsupportable. So that's that. On the LXC side, we know that most of the tools currently work, although I believe there was still a gap with libvirt and LXC support. Resolved?
Not in our,
Non-ARM?
not in our,
Which part, libvirt or?
libvirt,
libvirt is available for ARM.
yes. With LXC. It runs on ARM,
Runs on ARM, but it can't control LXC.
yes.
Okay. All right. So libvirt the gap is gone. These things change a lot faster than I realized.
Well, Chuck did the work this cycle to enable it. It wasn't
Okay.
working before.
All right. So that's definitely a good place. We do know that OpenStack itself works with LXC and that also works on ARM.
Yep.
Although I don't quite know what the real world performance is of it.
It works, I haven't tested out the performance or anything.
Yeah, I know we had some smoke tests, but that's all I know is the none of that. But it is a realistic virtualization solution for ARM. If you accept its limitations up until the part where we get those security patches running, uploaded, and committed. So, is there any other alternatives for virtualization on ARM that is worth discussing or bringing up?
I don't know, I'd love to be able to talk to people to get timelines on Zen and KVM, but if no one in the room knows.
Well, KVM I know is currently being worked on.
Both are being worked on quite heavily, but I have no idea what the timelines are.
But there's not something out right now that's not
Yeah.
going to be ready for.
No, it's not going to be ready for LTS.
No, it's the
But
only,
not every session has to
consistently
focus
what
on
I'm-
only the next 5 months
No,
too,
no.
so.
consistently what I'm told is that when the first A15 chip lands,
Yeah,
KVM support will land with it.
yeah, and I've been told
And I'm
by
told to
some-
expect that Zen will probably lag by.
I've been told
a
by
month or
some
so.
Zen and IBM people that Zen's expected to lag by only a month or two behind KVM.
Yeah,
So I was just looking at the patches, and it says, I was just looking at the patches for KVM
Yes.
that was submitted, and it says that the Linaro toolchain isn't compatible. You have to use code sorceries.
I think that's just some compiler by someone or other involved in, it's not a real big issue, it's one of these things, the guy's doing these patches, he's fiddled around, he said, okay, the easiest thing to do is exist to change the build kernel because I know that works. And it's not there is a real requirement for installation either, it's probably just the other one. I don't know.
So, I mean, the experience might not be great, but it certainly seems like there could be technology preview stuff of KVM on ARM for this cycle.
well, my intent is that from the ARM team side is to pull in whatever we can into either universe or if it's patches against KVM, any other tools that are in main, pull in the patches at least, make sure that as long as they don't collide with anything that's x86, as long as it's clean code, at least pull it
So the
in.
patch is going to be in two parts, right? So there's the kernel patches and there's the patches to QEMU.
Right.
And so the kernel patches are going to depend on A15 and LPAE kernel patches. I don't know if you've got them in your kernel yet, but if you don't, then...
Yeah, it really depends if they go upstream and where they are. So that's what we're following.
They're blocked behind Russell at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
So that depends, because basically you might have to make a decision, do you want to pull those in even if Russell hasn't put them through history yet? If you don't want to do that, then that's a decision, but it probably means you're not going to keep caveats around.
What's your thoughts on that?
What?
What's your thoughts on us carrying non-mainline KVM patches?
Fine for ARM outside the mainline kernel. Like if it runs DI on that 4 or whatever variant we come up with Kel data, I'm willing to do anything for that. The x86 mainline kernel though, we can keep pretty pristine.
Yeah, sure.
So perhaps if it's Arch specific and doesn't impact OMAP 3, OMAP 4, I don't know, I'll set a scene.
Well, it's only going to work on A15 anyway, and we don't have an A15 targeted kernel.
Right,
So,
Which we don't have.
kind of a
in
non-starter.
mainline kernel, so
Yeah.
yeah.
as Adam says, it's non-starter. Certainly for 1204, it won't be mainline.
Not expecting it. I don't expect to see any chips in time.
On the other hand, if we make sure that, if we can get to a point where QEMU and KVM have the support required user land, there's nothing stopping us from providing A15 kernels post-release.
Well, and that's really what I want to make sure is that if the user land is available and we can get it in, then dot releases down the road on a LTS could pick up new hardware. We've done it on x86 and we do a dot release and pick up an A15 hardware.
Can we do that with a backport kernel?
Maybe.
There's a couple complications there. So we can enable new hardware if it's built out of one of the existing kernels fairly easily.
We can do it with backport kernels too. We do DI builds with backport kernels on x86.
But those still
It's getting the API from the hardware manufacturers, though.
It's more that if we have to drop a new kernel into updates, then you run into trouble. I mean, yeah, it works.
It works.
It works on a technical perspective, but the general philosophy of SRUing is not to drop an entirely new package in.
Oh, it's not necessarily the prettiest solution. On the other hand, if this is an LTS we're supporting for 5 years and we really want the A15 to work, we don't have that many options.
And we
Kernel
have-
backports are to, kernel hardware enablement is to some extent, at least for LTS, is to some extent an exception from the SRU.
we have a
So
strong
we could
policy
get
now.
an SRU approved to actually new a package into updates.
Yes.
We're looking to do
well,
that for now.
I'm not going to say that blanket as a blanket statement.
Well,
But for the case of backported kernels from newer releases, that's exactly what it is.
So we won't, yeah. In that case, it is distinctly it is viable. And since the antimony tree is relatively straightforward to add images to,
Yeah, I mean, Antimony's got relatively little to, I guess, if
Yeah.
you're doing new, yeah, I guess if you're doing new image images, sure.
and then it's just the usual headache of building something that includes the update trees, but
Sure.
that's an x86 headache as
But that's
well.
already done with.
So is user space going to work with an A15?
Sure.
Sure.
That's your other interesting question. At the moment, the Ubuntu packages for QEMU, there are two different blocks coming from two different sources. So the QEMU KVM stuff that you're using for KVM on x86 comes from straight upstream. It's either upstream QEMU or upstream QEMU KVM, I don't know which. And the QEMU that gets used for the emulated side for all the other architectures comes from QEMU Linaro.
In this case, I'd rather not make large changes to the KVM package after release beyond those that are necessary to keep it lockstep with the kernel, at the risk of breaking all of x86, which will bring hordes of angry users after us. But there is a second option. So there is a third tree that's besides the security updates and proposed that's called backports. It's not generally used in such a way, but we could dump KVM from Linaro there. Since it won't qualify under an SRU, but we could dump it into backports and then tell users to enable the backports archive to pick it up.
So my kind of vague suggestion is that you probably want to keep taking the ARM QEMU from QEMU Linaro like the way you do at the moment, even when you're using it for KVM, rather than trying to tie that into the x86 KVM tree, because that's just asking for trouble.
Well,
Updating the x86 side that you didn't need to touch.
If it's a separate package in and of itself and not in the existing KVM package, We would upload that to Precise, and then it could be, a backport request can go in to pull it back into Precise backport. Sorry, we would upload it to P+1, and then it could be backported to Precise backports, and then users can grab that by enabling that.
Well, sure, but the QEMU Lennar is already in the archive. The real question here is, will it have the support required for KVM on ARM by the time we release? If so, we don't have to fiddle with any of this crazy backport nonsense.
That's true.
And that's what we have to keep an eye out, is see where it's at before we lock down and validate, do we take it or don't we, or then we can worry about what we do later. Indubitably, if we go LTS with ARM with the current plan, there will be A15s, they will need support, and we'll have to figure out how to do it. And we'll work around it like is done in LTS on x86. We can manage to support newer x86 hardware. We'll have the same situation. And if it requires, I'm sure Colin will help me figure out where the heck a package has to go if we have to have it in order to make it work.
There are existing patterns.
Yeah, there's, I mean, ideally,
As I said, as Peter says, the question is really more whether it's going to require some standard extras, space changes on top, in which case it's more challenging.
So there definitely are a lot of user space changes that need to be done, a lot of which are on my to-do list for this next quarter, and probably the quarter after that. So whether they will all get in, when's your freeze deadline for LTS?
it's,
January?
January?
Feature freeze is
12th of February.
16th, I think.
It's here. February 6th.
Yeah, I'm sceptical about whether we'll get all the kernel changes and the kernel changes there by February.
Well-
Well, the thing is, we don't even have hardware at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't think it doesn't need to be a polished solution at release. It needs to be a
So I guess that's kind of my question is, what are you looking for to be there by that date? And what's so you might get, so obviously there will be a kernel, it might not be 15, and there will be a kernel in the archive, and the question is, if in 3 months after that or whatever, when things
Well-
are actually finished, are you willing to take a back pause at that point that's okay, we've got it done now, or is that completely off the table?
it's a bit of a unique exception since it's going to be a kernel that we're not actually going to be shipping an image for out of the gate. So I think, and this is my release team hat on, it would be viable to have a standing freeze exception for it in the archive. I mean, Colin, would you like to throw your 2 cents in here? You look like you want to.
I'd like to have some idea of the scope of the changes before saying that kind of thing.
Well, this is just.
You may have a better idea of the scope of the changes than I do, but if that's the case, that's fine. If it's things like what sort of changes are we talking about outside? So KVM, I think I at least conceptually understand what kind of changes would be involved. What is there elsewhere?
So it's going to be its own A15 kernel package, which doesn't exist right now.
User space.
User space, I believe it's just Lennar KVM and a couple patches to enable things for ARM, but those can be shipped before the feature freeze and even fall under bug fix category.
Sure, I mean, to me, those come under the general category of LTS hardware enablement, which is something that we have already committed to doing. But
From my understanding of what's been discussed, it's pretty much going to be self-contained in both that kernel and that Lenaro KVM package.
And I mean, we've also.
Purely Lenaro at the moment is providing a bunch of stuff to people, but it's providing basically developer QEMU for
Right.
all non-x86 architectures. So in some sense, if you're pulling in a new version of that for A15 support, you're potentially giving everybody else a version upgrade for their other stuff. But that's a development tool rather than a.
I thought they were using stock KVM for that. I mean, it may be necessary then to fork out the ARM, to have a fork of that package for the ARM KVM.
I think we don't need to solve that today.
I think he's right. So
I think we see what it is.
I don't know, do you really want to have 3 versions of QEMU in your archive?
No, we really don't.
we already-
I think QEMU Lenaro is already
It's
sort
already
of
there.
unstable by design. So the idea that we would be pulling in new versions isn't the end of the world. What we do need to do before that, before release, is get KVM to a point where on ARM it is using QEMU Linaro, so that we don't have to fix that post-release.
That should be pretty straightforward.
So when you say KVM, what do you mean there?
It's what package provides. So there's a complicated system that provides the alternatives in Ubuntu. I won't go into the gory details, but we need to make sure on ARM, KVM, QEMU Linaro will be the default provider for KVM and not the existing KVM.
So that's just so if you say I want to install KVM.
We basically have to smash it with a heavy brick, but it's not as bad. We'll be ready for that far.
All right, so we've gone a bit far afield. Let's try to tidy this up so we can close this down. We've stated that the license changed on the A9 virtualization, so it's a non-starter for the distro. We'll document it so at least people can find it.
It might be worth contacting them and just clarifying first before we.
It looks pretty intentional, but
All right, so we'll contact them, we'll clarify, we'll at least have a documentation page so that people know we're aware of it and there's no issues.
Bootloaders, oh, that is a good point.
Yeah, I mean, X changes have been, there's an independent discussion about dealing with X stack upgrades for LTS hardware enablement, which is of course necessary in all sorts of cases. But Luther,
Well,
you know what kind of, I assume that you would need U-boot changes, but.
I think X is a little bit, I'm not too concerned about. This is server hardware we're talking about, so if X doesn't work, I'm kind of happy to
You're not
sit.
desperately scared.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, the bootloader on ARM by nature, the bootloader is unique to the targeted platform.
Do you not ship any bootloader on images?
We do, but we don't,
But they're specific to the platform the images are built for.
Oh,
So-
sorry, you mean that it's not a risk to other platforms?
Right.
Right.
It's absolutely not a risk.
new
because-
kernel means new bootloader as well. So
Yeah, it's-
Right, I mean, if there's no risk to other platforms, there's no concern.
the only
Yeah.
shared infrastructure that would usually have to get hit with a stick is usually libdebian installer and flash kernel. We just had a long session on how to reduce the amount of code duplication we have between those 2 points.
Sure. libdebian installer is a trivial change, flash kernel, that's
Right, but in that
So-
one,
libdi is a trivial and not risky change. It is
Yeah.
it is an addition of an enum entry or
Yeah.
an entry or whatever. So it's
So I think given that it's ARM, on other platforms I might be concerned, given the nature of ARM and that the bootloader is effectively married to the platform and the kernel and is not used in any other ARM platform or kernel. And certainly not used on x86. I think the risk is so low that I can easily justify it to anyone.
this,
So it's a thing we're going to have to do. So if we wind up doing A15 first time express,
No.
supported platform, whatever it is,
Currently,
you've got to do all
the
the stuff you need to do to support a new ARM platform.
currently
Yeah.
the only ARM platform that has any close ties at that level to x86 is OMAP 3, which you're never going to run this stuff on anyways.
Yeah.
And that's just because we're using the mainline kernel for that. OMAP 4 is still not mainline. Quick Start, I don't believe is going to be mainline for a while.
Yeah.
AC100 is definitely not mainline.
So we have nothing that'll touch an x86 tree that we're going to mess with. So I don't see it as an issue.
This does bring up one important point. Colin, how often does DI get SRU past release? Because we need to respin it.
all the time.
Okay, so that becomes a moot point, and that solves my last concern for platform enablement.
So do we have the action items in terms of who is going to contact the virtualization for A9 upstream and just validate license
hang
issues?
on. I've got 4 work items to start with, and I just want to get clarification and see where they're going. First one, you wanted documentation of Code Zero guide as an option. Yeah. That to me is a low priority, to be honest. But I mean,
It's very low, but
yeah.
I don't want to have the community coming up and asking us dozens of times, what about this? Because I've already been asked 8 times in the last month.
Okay, fair enough. And they want to use that. Great.
It's their headache. I just want to be able to, here's the answer, go read it, leave me alone.
Okay, who's doing that? Is that the ARM team doing that?
Yeah, ARM team will do it. we'll assign after who. but-
UDS.
Okay, that's fine. Evaluate Zen progress as a possibility for an SIU.
I think we just resolved that one. I think we just decided it was viable for us anyway.
Yeah,
That was
but
KVM.
but the thing is, I think someone needs to be tracking the progress, and that's not currently happening.
Yes, that's true, and I think we should probably have an entire page dedicated to the ARM hardware enabled SRU process, because that's a
Yep.
question that's going to
Okay.
pop up multiple times.
Who's going to be doing that?
Thanks, David.
What's your launchpad?
And Commander.
Of course it is. Okay. Evaluate KVM patch support. Target for tech preview. SIU for supported.
That probably needs to go to someone in Lunara.
So-
I'm between stuff, so certainly I'm going to be evaluating and working on the KVM stuff. I guess what I want from you is a sort of a set of dates and what your expectations and requirements are from us as QM and Linaro as your upstream.
So hang on.
In terms of-
I think it's. I don't think we're expecting it to actually be a good solution for release.
Yeah.
But we want the
That's
framework in
impression I
place.
got. I just like something definitely.
Yeah,
clear.
well, framework is gonna fall on us, whereas code functions falls on them.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Actually, that-
Framework is ARM team. Lenaro Connect next is beginning of February.
Sorry?
Lenaro Connect, the next one, beginning of February.
February, San Francisco, yes.
yeah,
So I think that's our checkpoint.
definitely hook up there.
We hook up at Lenaro Connect next and checkpoint where that's at.
Correct.
It's
Okay.
before our feature freeze. We can,
Okay. And the last one I've got is document hardening of LXC. That's probably something which falls onto Surge, I think.
that one's probably going to move it to the LXC spec, but just leave
Mostly
it.
search, but
yeah.
I'll put him, and I think he can liaise with you.
he'll
Someone elaborate on hardening?
Oh, you're here.
Hardening.
So, I mean, it was basically, we need your guidance on this, because I know over the years you've written documentation on hardening LXC, and it's still kind of a black box to the rest of us on what we can do, because we're aware we can't quite get it perfect, but it's...
I wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
just whatever we have done.
But yeah, I mean, I know you've got some writings going back years on sort of some of the things you can do, but I think that needs to be refreshed, and is what we need to do actually get into detail what we can actually achieve and where the holes still are, because that's currently not very well documented. Is that fair to say?
do you think that would?
So things we can add to packaging, perhaps, yeah. So if we can provide a harder experience by default, yeah. But also I think there's probably going to be manual steps, and also outlining where the pitfalls are. I think it needs to be by wiki.
Yeah, it just is, what are the holes right now type thing? What do you need to be aware of? Yeah, the front of it.
I mean, where do you see, when you say you document it? You're talking about like a blog post, you're talking about documentation in the package, that's what I'm wondering what.
Well,
I think just a wiki probably. and
yeah,
then-
wiki. But I mean, I guess for the really geeky, you could put it in a README file in the package.
Read me in the package,
maybe.
but wikis are good.
And hell, go crazy, do the man page as well. I mean, does that sound okay?
Sure.
So are we done then?
I think so.
So your session, who's going to that?
Which one?
The KVM, the Linaro KVM on ARM?
I'll be there. There's a couple other work items that we probably should get in here. They're a little off topic, but they came out of previous discussion. Is
You've got a laptop in front of you.
nuts.
Good job, Mike.